scripture reading is taken from Proverbs 3, verse 5 and 6. And I'm going to read in your hearing. Proverbs 3, verse 5 and 6. It's taken from the King James Version, I believe. And it says, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not on your own understanding, and acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path. I'll read it one more time. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thy understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall lead your path. Without further ado, this secret mystery person that we're about to hear is none other than Meaghan herself. I am excited to hear this sermon. So Meaghan, please come through and bless us.
Sorry. Good morning, everyone. As you can see, Hans asked me to talk this morning. Well, technically it was supposed to be next Sabbath, but I'm not here. And I obviously agreed because, I don't know. I felt like I haven't been here. Okay. I've known Hans for a really long time. I actually met him a couple years ago at camp. He was my youth pastor for the week, and so I felt a little bit that I was asked to talk. I didn't know exactly what I was going to talk about at first. I had to think about it because he kind of gave me a very wide topic, and I'm still learning a lot, and so I figured since some of you don't really know me, it's still a lot of one-sided information, whether it's my parents talking about me or a sibling or just me answering a question. But you don't really know where I came from. You don't know the teachings I've had to sit through, the people who have made me question my faith, the times where I thought I don't want to believe in this if I must follow that rule or saying or thought, where I felt helpless and lost. It's no grand finding of faith in God, but it is important to me because everyone's walk with God matters. And I decided to share what my life has been like so far. I can 100% say that I'm not sure what you'll take out of this. I'm only 18 years old, older than a few of you, but younger than most of you. And in order to kind of begin with my walk with God, we have to go all the way back to where it started. I did not come to find out about what the church was at an older age like a lot of people had, but instead it's all I've ever known. I was born and raised into the church. I grew up going to Sabbath school with my older brother and cousin, getting told to behave in the sanctuary, the pastor's voice kind of always lulling me to sleep. My interests... My interests then were not really about what the Bible was, unless it was VeggieTales, because VeggieTales always will be the best. The only people I knew that were Seventh-day Adventists at the time was my family and the church, because I grew up going to public school, not an Adventist private school. And in elementary school, I really did not get why I had to miss so-and-so's birthday because we had church. It was hard to explain to others why I don't eat the same foods as them or why I go to church on Saturday, not Sunday, because I didn't know why other than that's what I was told, and it's what the Bible said. Because like any young child, I followed what my parents taught me, even if I didn't always understand it. I'm not saying I was a well-behaved child, though. That's a story for my parents to tell, not me, because they raised me and my brothers, and we were not always the best children. Still aren't. So as the years go on and I kept growing older, I was finally starting to get to the age where I was allowed to go to Sunset Lake. My first time going to summer camp, the only summer camp I've ever gone to and will only go to. I would say this is when I actually started to pay more attention to what the pastors were saying. Well, at least the camp ones. When they talked, I would not fall asleep. At home, I was always sleepy, but there early every morning, I was listening and slowly learning more. I slowly fell in love with the plays that Pastor Dave would have go on throughout the week, And the stories were fascinating. And when my counselor said it was inspired by a Bible story, I wanted to know more. All I really knew of off the top of my head were a few stories, and even then, they were missing a lot of information. Camp has been one of the places that pushed me into finding more about my faith. I finally was seeing and meeting other kids my age who were not from church. They believed in the same things or more similar beliefs that I had. They ate the same foods. I was able to go to church on Saturday with them because a lot of them also did. So it was nice meeting people who were more like me. The most interesting thing to me was the personal stories I started to hear and listen to at camp. Because as most people know, at Sunset Lake, Friday night is the night filled with tears. It is one of the most emotional nights of the week because after a skit they put on, there might be personal testimonies told, but after it all, before you go back to your cabin goes out to the lake to these tiki pools they had set around the lake. And you guys sit down and you have these in-depth conversations, which you don't typically get from church. And most of the time, you would get these heartfelt stories about people finding their faith and what their walk was. But I actually never liked Friday nights because I felt, what did I have to tell my cabin mates? Unlike most of them, I didn't have a grand walk with God in my eyes. It's all I've ever known. Go to church, read your Bible, even though I never did. And on Friday night, you're given this little piece of paper, and you're supposed to check off a box. And there's these 4 boxes. And if I remember correctly, box 1 was, for I don't know a lot about God, but I want to know more. Box 2 was, I know about God and I want to get baptized. Box 3 was, I've been baptized but want to get baptized again. And box 4 was what I would like to have a Bible, which was for people who just founded faith or those for the exchange campers who wanted a Bible. And I never knew which box to pick. I actually left mine blank many years because, well, I already have my own Bible, and so I didn't need a new one. And I thought I already had began my walk with God because I thought, well, I already go to church. Isn't that my walk with God? Going to church, being good in church, isn't that what it's all about? And I kind of didn't like the idea of being baptized at the time because, well, I didn't understand it. It made no sense to me. Like, what, I get in the water, they dip me under, after some words, and bam, I start a deep relationship with God. Like, telling that to a little kid, it doesn't quite make sense. And I just didn't want to do it. And then I remember one year, I think it was a little bit after I started Pathfinders, or maybe 12 or 13, I decided to check that box because I felt left out. Around that time, I watched a lot of my friends decide to do this. And I was like, am I wrong for not wanting to get baptized? And after checking that box, later, a little bit after camp ended and I was going back to my actual church, one of the elders, he came up to me and was talking to me and said, oh, I heard Pastor Dave said you checked the box to get baptized. And I just kind of shrugged it off. And I was like, it's whatever. It didn't happen. It doesn't need to happen right now. I'm like, I don't really feel confident enough to do it. And I don't want to do it at the church because I didn't really like the church. I didn't feel like it's where I wanted to get baptized. And I still didn't feel like I knew enough about it. And then around the same time, a little bit after starting camp, I started Pathfinders in 2014. I was finally old enough. I was so excited because I had to watch my older brother, James, our family friend Levi, and my cousin Mikey go to all these cool events. And they would come home and kind of brag about it to me about like, oh, I just did this and this. And I started to feel so jealous because I wanted to do it too. And as Ms. Schmidt says, I'm the most memorable one because when I finally was allowed to join the club, I marched in there and yelled. Maybe I did yell at her. I don't know. But I was like, I'm finally being let into the club because where my birthday falls, I was old enough, but I wasn't allowed to join till I was in 5th grade. And I thought it was unfair because Levi got to join when he was in 4th grade, but I wasn't. And so I was a little bit of a salty child. But then I finally started going all these campings and all the fun outings like my brother and cousins did. And I visited fair with my parents before, and so I was really excited to be part of it. And so my first year, you're considered a Friends, which is the first year of Pathfinders. And I loved being in my group because I had a big group at the time, as most of the classes do. And there was a lot of kids my age, but also a lot of adults who are still a big part of my life that I am glad have been there. But one of my least favorite things was part of your classwork to go to the next level the next year, you had to read a book of the Bible. And this was the first time I ever actually had to sit down and read a book of the Bible by myself. Now, I did not want to have to read and write questions for each chapter of the Bible that I had to read from the book. I think first years read Matthew, and it's not that long, but still, when you aren't used to reading, you kind of go, I don't want to read this. And I found it boring, and I want to do other things. I actually think I didn't finish it till a month before it was due. But in order to finish classwork, you have to do it, and so I kind of buckled down and got it done. But I have to still read Matthew because I just kind of did what a little kid would be like and be like, skim it and be like, oh yeah, this is important. This is important. Yeah, this is what I found new because I'm like, it's the first time I'm reading it. I could write anything and they wouldn't know. And of course, Miss Christensen just went, she's in 5th grade. I'll let it pass. But the other part was you had memory verses we had to memorize from the Bible. And I think they start you off with 5. And at the time, I was still working on learning how to memorize things, but for me, learning memory verses has never been easy. I still only know John 3:16 off the top of my head, because that one's kind of drilled into your head from a young age. But going to events, my parents wouldn't drive me. I would carpool, and I carpooled with Miss Christensen and her kids, with my brother and cousin. And her daughter, Ellie, and I, we would get the back seat to ourselves because we were the youngest, and we'd be like, this is our territory. Boys, you go in the front, we get the back. And so she knew I did not like memorizing verses. So Ellie took it upon herself, and I'm very grateful that she did, to kind of make a competition with me in a game of who can memorize the most verses first, because she was in PBE, so she was already memorizing things and recalling memory, and I'm just sitting there trying to steal her spelling words so we can play games. So she helped me a lot, and she was with me in the club till just 2 years ago when she decided to go to Fountain View. It still hurts my heart. So we would still, to this day, we would still do the competition of when we had memory verses, we'd see who could get it done first, and we just constantly keep the competition going because it just became our thing. And most people probably didn't get it because they're like, oh, just memorize it and then you can forget it. But Ellie and I would try to recall last year's memory verses and see who did better. I always lost, hands down. I was not good at it. But obviously my first years were a lot of fun. I made a lot of really close friends, and I still am in contact with a lot of them. And it helped me learn, start to actually want to study the Bible and learn more, because I was hearing these stories from slightly older kids who were had much deeper faith than me that were telling me all these great things. When I was 13, I started to go to teen events. You had Teen Extreme, and then you had teen events. Teen Extreme was fun. You got to go whitewater rafting, rock climbing, caving. But there's always an aspect to it that you learn about God. With rock climbing, you learned that you have to trust your rope like you trust God, because without your rope, you can fall. With caving, you're in darkness. You have to blindly follow someone else because you don't know where you're going. And whitewater rafting, you're in the middle of a rapid. You got to hold on. You got to, be brave. But I would also, at teen events, they had these speakers. It would be the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And they would bring in some speaker from further away or not. And the speakers were amazing, don't get me wrong, but I never connected with them. Because for me, I always went to church. It's just what I've known. But these speakers, they would come in and they would have these big discoveries of God and all this turmoil that they had to go through in order to come into a deeper faith. And when you're a little young, it's very impressionable when you're all you hear are these big stories. You don't hear something your own that matches with you for a really long time, or maybe never. And so all these kids who have all this turmoil that are around me were relating, but I just sat there yeah, that was good. He made a good point, but I don't see this fitting in my life. I don't see myself getting into drugs and then having to get away from it, doing all these things. I'm like, it's just not who I am. It's not how I grew up. I didn't grow up in that kind of environment. And I was getting confused because I still didn't know what faith really meant. I knew what the Bible meant, and I was like, oh, I know where this is, but not really. And I was slowly starting to take my religion more serious, but I still wasn't really paying attention in church. I would sit and draw on anything I was allowed to. I was still not really reading my Bible except when Pathfinders called for it. I was still going to church, but not because I wanted to, but because it's what I was taught. I didn't want to go to church. It was just every Saturday, you wake up at 6:30, you get ready for church, you go to Sabbath school. After Sabbath school, you sit in the pew and you listen to the sermon and go through church. And it's just was my routine every weekend. Or if it was Pathfinder weekend, I would go to Pathfinders and we would wake up and listen to whoever is speaking. And as the years went on and I started to transition into high school, I was able to join teen leadership training through Pathfinders. And this program started to open my eyes and show me that how I acted about my faith reflects onto those younger than me and in my everyday life. I was learning what it meant to be a leader within the church. I was slowly being allowed to actually teach the classes and have these more in-depth talks about religion and how to have it present in my day-to-day life. But being in public school, I was also able to learn about other religions that you don't get an opportunity to do if you go to a private school. My freshman/sophomore year, the people I would sit with at lunch was a big mix of different religions. We had Mormons, we had very different kinds of Christians, we had some atheists, and we just had people who weren't interested and just were like not believers, but they were interested. And then there's me, the 1 Adventist. And I was always the odd one out because they would be talking about these sermons they heard, like the Mormons would talk about what they heard, or the ones who went to church, they would all talk about it, and I would be like kind of confused because I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me because it's not what I was taught. And I always got asked the most questions by the Mormons because, well, I had the biggest difference in from what I eat to when I go to church. And I remember sophomore year, I was kind of just shrugged it off and tried to avoid the questions because I had vague answers. I couldn't give them exact information because, well, I still didn't really know my Bible. Like, I knew some stories and stuff. Like, I knew the differences and, like, the hard facts, but I didn't know enough to help satisfy their questions. So I got asked the same question again and again and again. And it just made me want to learn more and have a better understanding about what faith meant to me and what it meant to be a Seventh-day Adventist. And so I started to take it more seriously, actually serious around that time. But at the same time, I started to wonder if this is really what I wanted to be a part of, if this was the faith I truly wanted. Because at the time, the Sabbath school class I was in, I was finally in the high school / young adults because like it was a decent sized church, but the youth was really, really small, so we had big gaps. And I was the youngest high schooler, and at the time I was prepping for Footloose the musical with my high school. And I always had a love for the fine arts and just art, music, or theater, and I've always been interested in learning more about it. But my Sabbath school teachers, they knew this about me, but they still chose to play these videos about acting and how it was the devil's work, and that those who act let the devil in because of the characters they played. And I felt quite offended by this, because it was something I felt deeply about. I loved going to theater events and just learning more skills. And then they also played these videos of how Christian music is the only music you should listen to. And this other music, like band after band after band that I grew up listening to, was just leading you towards the wrong path. And I was like, why do we have to put these caps on it? Like, before, I only heard my grandpa go, oh, that's the devil's music. So I just put it off behind me. And I was like, my grandpa's old. He's a cranky old man. So it doesn't matter. He's going to say negative things because that's just the way he is. But when you hear people who are supposed to be teaching you how to be a better Christian in your everyday life saying you shouldn't be doing this, but you have conflicting opinions, I didn't know who to start believing. My mom would say that there was nothing wrong with this, but I started to see more comments like this sometimes from pathfinders from different clubs or within my own club, within my church. I didn't know what to think was true. Are they twisting words around, or was there nothing wrong with listening to Christian music and non-Christian music? Because I'm not doing anyone harm. It's not changing my view on the church, but it was something that made me kind of falter in, like, is this my faith? Is this what I want? Because I don't like being told, well, not like I don't like being told no, but like when you're deeply passionate about something, when you're passionate about something and you want to learn more about it, but you get told by learning this, you're not going to be faithful, it kind of hurts, especially when you're trying to learn more about your faith. Because I would look at the Mormons, and their parents were fine and approved of them doing theater and listening to all this kinds of music. And same with the other Christians. So I'm like, why are we having to be different? I wouldn't be a Mormon, no. And so, like, I was in this spot where I was, like, not very strong in my faith, and I was kind of getting low, and I was like, well, I'm here because I need to be here. And so now, the summer after my freshman year, there was a lot of fun things that happened, but it was also a really hard one for me. It was the first time I was ever able to be an internship at Sunset Lake, which was really fun. I had a lot of fun, and I also got to experience Oshkosh with my club. And I had a lot of fun doing all of this. I was at camp for about 3 weeks and then was in Wisconsin for 1. Physically, I was fine. Mostly, though, I was putting on a smile, was easily, and you would have thought I was having fun. But really, I was struggling. Mentally, I was not doing well. And 2 people I'm really grateful to have in my life noticed this. The Friday during my internship, I felt like I was choking, and I was going to puke. My mind was, I don't know how to exactly put it into words because it's not something you can describe to someone. It's really hard. I started to have this uncontrollable shaking, and I just didn't know what was happening because I've never had this experience before. And my friend Katrina and Katriana, they both had taken psychology classes, so they kind of knew what was going on, and they were able to help me. And before I even understood, I still don't really understand. And the therapist that was at camp for that week, because it was a preteen teen week, and so they had therapists there for, like, if someone was there, they could talk to them. And, sorry. After I was finally able to start breathing normally and calm down, a couple days later, they had me talk to the therapist. And she told me I had a panic attack / anxiety attack. I'm sorry. They told me it should have not happened again. She thought I was just being overwhelmed with how much I was doing because I like to be busy, but she thought maybe because it was my first time having such a busy summer and with so many big things happening, I just got overwhelmed. But it wasn't the last time I had a panic attack or anxiety attack. They started to happen during school days where I felt like I wasn't doing enough, and I would just get so overwhelmed where I had to find somewhere to be where people weren't around because I didn't want people to know. I would put on a smile and act like I was fine because I didn't want people to think I was being weird. When I was in Oshkosh, I got one in the middle of the week from I don't know why. There's just so many people there, and I just freaked out. And it was really hard for me because I felt like I couldn't tell anyone. And I would just pretend like it wasn't something happening. I would pray about it to God and ask him why it was like this. Why can't I be fine in large areas of people? Why did I have to get like this? I was already struggling with what my faith meant to me. And I just did not know how to deal with these things that could happen with no warning. It really scared me. It still does scare me because I knew that I should turn to my Bible, and I tried because I knew God was there for me, which was hard when you don't have a strong relationship because you don't know where to turn to. And I knew it was probably around the time of finals, and I was just felt like I was going to go into one. And so I was doing grounding exercises that I knew about, and I was praying, and I grabbed my Bible, and like there's those stories of people, they grab their Bible and it just opens up to a passage that helps them. And this was the first time I've ever actually had this happen for me. And it opened up to Psalms 56:3, and it was, "Whenever I'm afraid, I will trust in you." And for some odd reason, I felt slightly better because I realized that it's not all on me, that God has a plan and things happen for a reason. And that I needed to remember to not let everything come down on me. Now, other than having not the best mental health, I still smiled and made sure to enjoy my times with friends and Pathfinders because I knew that this was something I enjoyed. And so I knew that even if I do feel like I'm going to have one of these, if I just remember to breathe, I can continue having fun. And it allowed me to kind of just get back to normal and learn how to work around these. My old church, though, still caused a lot of problems. They created this toxic Christian environment that should not have ever happened. I was put into a box that I was not really allowed to step out of. My role in the church was to help my grandma in community services and with potluck. And I didn't really want to do those because I always grew up with my grandma just taking me with her to community service events, and I just happened to help. I was never asked if I wanted to help. I just happened to help with potluck because I made food and I would bring it down, and then I would get asked to help. But they never asked me if I wanted to be really a part of this. And I felt like they were just trying to keep me in this box. Like I was supposed to just sit in the pew and listen. My grandpa, whenever he was the elder of the month, he would try to ask me to help up front, but it was really far out of my comfort zone, and I didn't want to do it because it makes me really nervous being in front of that church because I always felt like I was being judged for anything and how I act. And so I think it was just a little bit before COVID, my mom was asked to take over the decorating of the church, and she asked me if I would be willing to help her. And so I started to be able to make these wreaths, and I felt like I was being able to show my creative side into the church and helped make it feel more welcoming and lively by putting plants and taking care of the plants. It gave me something to do that I was passionate about, and I could help with the church. We weren't doing anything wrong, but some members started to act rude towards my mom and started saying really negative things towards her. And I know they weren't ever pointed towards me, but I still felt bad because I knew I was a part of this, that this was something I thought I was doing to help better the church, but people were taking it negatively, and I didn't understand why. Because growing up, you're taught as a Christian to treat others with kindness, and I started not wanting to attend church more than ever. It was the one I always grew up in, so it was hard to leave, but they stopped complaining during COVID and stuff, but not really, and it just kept getting worse and worse, and negative words, it was starting to make me rethink things, but it just made me want to get a better relationship to show them what a Christian should be, because I got tired of their negativity. And well, when COVID came around, it put a hold on all of our lives. It changed about how we went every day. My sophomore year was ended early. We were home all the time, but most importantly, we were not going to church. I was glad that we could not go. I was able to focus more on myself and what I wanted for my walk with God. When the fall came around and I was able to at least go to Pathfinders, I was happy to see all the kids and the others. I did not enjoy online school. It was really hard for me because it's just not how I learn. But every Tuesday, going to Pathfinders made my week. It slowly made me feel happy again. We were starting to slowly go back to church, but I was not really content with what they were saying and stuff. I still wasn't listening. I was doing my own studies instead. I was ignoring what my Sabbath school teacher said because it just made me feel worse about myself. And around the end of November, I talked to my parents about how if they had camp next summer in 2021, I wanted to get baptized by Pastor Dave because he was the only pastor I ever wanted to be baptized by. And I was finally able to see why it was more than just getting dipped in water. I was ready for God to have more control in my life. That I was ready to stop fighting against my faith, but be more with it. And the Monday after telling them this, I actually got told that he was coming up to preach on the 5th of December. And by the time I was able to get a hold of my grandparents and we were get permission and stuff, I had 3 days to get a hold of him and ask if he would be willing to baptize me. I could not get a hold of him Wednesday or Thursday. I started to really panic because if I could not ask him, then it would not happen. And come Friday, I sat down and prayed and asked God that if he was ready, I was ready. That if the timing is right to let Pastor Dave answer this call, just to really answer it. And he was finally able to answer my call at 4 o'clock in the evening. I asked him, he said, yes, of course, if you're okay with Meaghan, I'm okay with it. And so literally the next day, December 5th of 2020, I was finally baptized. I may have been almost 17, but I finally felt like it was right for me. Because if I got baptized when I felt like I was only doing it because I was being left out, I would not have embraced my faith. I would have just been like, oh yeah, I'm baptized. There's nothing behind it. But now I can say I was baptized because I wanted to be a Christian and continue my faith. And slowly things started to open up and go back to normal. My family started to look for a church where we could feel like we belonged. And we ended up here. As I'm speaking here, so obvious where we came. At first, I was really nervous to come to a new church because I've only ever gone to my old one and the one up north, which is a little bit further than us. And at first, the day we came, I felt more welcome than I ever have been. I actually listened to the person speaking. I think it was, Meaghan was preaching. And I was actually intrigued by what he had to say. It was not boring, and I actually walked away with something. As we started to come on a normal basis, I went to the first youth event ever. That was a really long drive. I hope you know that. Went on the ferry for my first time. I was like, woo, this is my first time doing all of this by myself. The youth event was actually a lot different than what I was used to in Pathfinders. Like, I remember I was getting there. I remember my mom telling me, you have to give your phone in because you're not supposed to. And I walked up to Veronica, and I was trying to give her my phone, and she's just like, oh, just keep it. Just hide it away. I'm like... And I'm like, but you said I don't need my phone. Like, there's nothing I can do on it. I don't need it. And so I was just, like, trying to give it away. And I was like, I'm used to... Because I was used to being in Pathfinders where it's completely phones free every Tuesday, every camp out, and all I ever got was the camera. And so I was like, okay. I still ended up giving my phone to Sergio because I was like, I don't need this. I don't need to break my phone. I would get killed, so let's not do that. And I felt like I was getting deeper in my faith. And slowly but surely, I started my senior year just this last fall. It was way better than my junior year already to start. I was in person at school. I was doing good in all my college classes and my high school classes. And Pathfinders was doing great. I was working on my master guide. I was making progress. And then something I thought would happen that I never want to happen ever again, but it didn't have to happen. But someone I grew up with and went to Pathfinders with and had years of memories with decided their life was not worth anything, and they decided they shouldn't live anymore. And this was really hard on me. It was the first time, like, I knew people who passed before, but this was the first time someone my age who I knew passed. And I didn't want to accept it was true at first because I just he was a prankster. So I was like, he has to be pulling a prank. Please tell me it's a prank, because he shouldn't have done that, because my brother and cousin were broken. I just saw people broken all around me, and I didn't know what to do because myself was not fit. I ended up missing weeks of school because I just couldn't be around students who were like trying to remember him, but they weren't. And it was hard for me. My math teacher did a really good job and was like, hey, can you come in and take this test for me? And that's it. And she knew I didn't do the best on my test, and she knew I'm very strict on myself with my test scores, and she asked me if I wanted to redo it. It was the first test I've never retaken because I was like, I just can't. I don't know the material, and I'm not fit for it. It was hard for me, and going to Pathfinders, it was easier, but it was still hard because it was part of stuff we did, and it was hard, and I wanted to yell and curse out God. I didn't understand why he would let this happen. I was lost like I've never been before. It just really hurt me. But I had to remember that God has a reason for everything. It was hard for me at first because you don't want to go through that. And I had some help with some close friends. My friend Katran and I talked back and forth because she can't be here because she is in Canada. But she and I talked because she also grew up with Levi, and so we had some in-depth conversations about it. And slowly, I was able to start getting through it, and I was start to be able to get back into my rhythm of, this is my senior year, I need to focus, I need to graduate and get my college applications in and stuff. And now we're back to here, to the present, where I'm still learning every day. It's still a battle between me and my faith, but instead of where I forget to turn to my faith and I let my thoughts take over, I may have a better understanding of what faith means to me, and I'm a little bit more confident to openly talk about going to church and my religion. I still don't talk to a lot of my classmates about it, but one of the teachers, a history teacher that I've known since the middle school teacher, he is a Christian, but he's also interested in other religions, so him and I will have these in-depth conversations about different things, and we'll just talk about it. And I feel like he understands me enough that he's not going to judge me. Versus when I try to talk to high schoolers, they kind of get this judgy attitude of like, well, that doesn't make sense. That's not normal. Sergio, shush. I now understand more that it's okay to not know a lot about the Bible stories or know the books of the Bible well. And that my story to finding what faith meant to me may not have been the most dramatic ups and downs. I don't want to take your papers. Up and downs. But there still were things that led me to where I am now. I was able to learn from going to camp every year of like what it means to slowly be young and learning about your faith, and that it's okay to have these mishaps, and that no one is going to judge you, and those who are judging you should knock it off. From doing Pathfinders the last 8 years, I've learned how to be able to lead within the church, within my Pathfinder club, to be able to see when not every church is the one meant for you, that we don't always have all the answers, but God does. He has a plan for us, and that sometimes the plan has a lot of things that are negative, but they teach us a valuable lesson. And more often than not, we get all of these positive events and that bring joy in our lives and happy memories and people who are in your life for a reason. People come and leave. And every day might be a new battle. And on those days when your faith is losing to my thoughts, I try to remember Proverbs 3, verse 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understandings in all your ways, but submit to him and he'll make a plan for me. Not a plan for me. Make your path straight. I'm skipping lines. And I don't necessarily memorized it. I have my, like, what it means to me. And that means that every time my life gets hard, which it will continue getting hard, I still have a long way to go. I have to remind myself that God has a plan for me. That when I try to figure out everything on my own, I become lost. I take the wrong turns, but when I take a minute and stop, breathe, and turn to God, He will lead me back to the right path. And that's my story of faith versus me.